Hey guys, welcome back to Willpower Garage. Today I'm working on a 2012 Ram 2500 with a 6.7 liter diesel Cummins engine. If you're getting codes for a low rail pressure or the fuel pressure relief valve, then you might want to follow along. I'll show you a couple of things you could test, a couple of things you could try, and ultimately what I found wrong with this particular diesel. Follow along. The fuel rail pressure is monitored by a sensor that is all the way in the back of the fuel rail there. It screws onto the back of the fuel rail. It's sealed up with a little rubber O-ring. They are very common to go bad, but I wouldn't automatically declare it as bad. One of the other things that's very common on these, if you look down here on the driver's side is the diesel injection pump. This is a CP3 version injection pump. There is a solenoid. It's a little hard to see because they're behind these power steering lines or AC lines. So the way this works is the sensor in the back feeds back the fuel pressure in the rail, and this little solenoid down there is what will adjust it. So at idle, if this thing's calling for 500 bar, this is going to set the fuel pressure so it's 500 bar. One of the other things I want to point out that's also very common to fail on these, and if you look, mine is currently bypassed. I'm going to pull this hose off of the breather here so we can get a better look. So if you look right down there, that nut coming off the back of the rail, that's an 18 millimeter. That is the fuel pressure relief valve. These sometimes can get hung up, or the spring gets weak over time, and it basically bypasses the fuel out here to the return feed and back to the tank. So you'll get a low fuel pressure there. Ultimately, the issue I have here though is my injection pump is bad. It is not outputting enough fuel pressure. It gets worse when it gets hot. So I'm going to replace this high pressure fuel pump. All right, one of the ways you could test this fuel pressure regulator here is with a scan tool. You can monitor the pressure that the sensor in the back of the fuel rail is reading. And if you disconnect the electrical connector on that regulation valve, it should go to full pressure. So you should see the fuel pressure come up. If it doesn't, this actuator itself might be bad, or it could be the pump, or it could be that pressure relief valve I pointed out. For me, diagnosing this thing, I've come to the conclusion that my high pressure fuel pump is bad. So generally what was happening was I wasn't getting enough fuel pressure. As the truck got up to operating temperature, the fuel pressure would drop. I disconnected that actuator. My fuel pressure did not change. Ultimately, what I did was, as you can see here, I essentially took out the return line, blocked off the port from the fuel rail so that I should get maximum fuel pressure here as well, even with it being regulated with the actuator on the pump. And unfortunately, the fuel pressure still drops. So I'm going to go through the procedure in this video here to replace that high pressure fuel pump. Okay, so looking at the driver's side of the truck here, obviously you can see the pump down here. So what I'm going to do to gain better access to it is I'm going to remove the intake elbow here, the EGR pipe, basically all of this so I have better room to get down to the pump. I'm also going to need to get to the front cover here so that I can remove the gear itself. And then from there, I'm going to have to put this engine in top dead center when I ultimately go to reinstall the pump itself. All right, so as you can see, I've got the air intake out. I could now see my injection pump much better. The harness is still sort of in the way, but there's only a few connections I need to take off of this right now. This line, and then the output line. I already removed the electrical connection from the fuel regulation valve here. Once I have that all off, I'm going to remove the nuts that hold the pump on, or at least loosen them. And then I'm going to come in from the front here and remove the cover so I can gain access to the nut that attaches the high pressure pump to the gear. This is a squeeze style clamp. Basically just squeeze down on both the sides here so you can get this off. Obviously that's a banjo, and then our hard line here, which I need to remove. This line here is a 19 millimeter. Loosen it up off the fuel rail as well. There we go. That way I could swing this guy out of the way. Okay, so now I'm going to loosen up the 3 mounting bolts. They're actually mounting nuts. These are 13 millimeter. I've got my belt out of the way. I've got the 3 mounting nuts off of the studs that hold the pump on. So next what I need to do is I need to remove this cover, and it has a 3/8 drive hex in it. So you use a standard ratchet, get it into here, and just unthread it. There's the removed cover. You can see the square 3/8 drive hex there. Now from inside here, I need to remove the retaining nut, and also keep in mind there is a spacer washer behind it. So when you remove that, be mindful of the washer behind. You don't want to drop that into the cover. So the nut on the gear here is 1.1/16. But before I go to remove that, I'm going to set the engine on top dead center, just so I know I have it close before I go removing the saw, because I will need to have it on TDC when I go to reinstall the pump. Now, one thing I should mention is it doesn't matter if it's on TDC for cylinder 1 or cylinder 6. To phase this pump properly, it just needs to be on TDC on one of them. All right, guys, real quick, I just wanted to show you TDC. If you look down there, that pink mark I have on the balancer, clean that out, and that is your TDC mark. That should be pointing straight up to the hood of the truck. All right, let's get this nut loose. Remember, there is a spacer washer behind the nut. Here's the nut. There's the spacer washer. All right, so as you can see here, I had to take off the clutch fan Unfortunately, to get the gear puller in there, there's not enough room with the fan in place. This particular clutch fan is a regular right-hand thread. These aren't reverse threads. So just keep that in mind. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. Once that's out of the way, you can get the tool in there to pull the gear. I already went ahead and did this just because it's difficult to try to film it and get it off. But this is really just a steering wheel puller. You can usually rent these at any of the major auto parts stores. So once you get this guy in here, basically gonna crank down on this and you're gonna see the injection pump start to push off of the back. Like I said, the 3 nuts that hold that pump on, you want those loose at this point so you can take it out without damaging the case. So I'm gonna go ahead right now and I'm gonna remove the pump. Alright guys, a couple things I want to point out here from the service manual. This picture right here is showing you that there is a bunch of numbers stamped on the front of the injection pump shaft. There's 3 digits. What those 3 digits are irrelevant. What we're looking for is the 5 in the middle. So it'll be some number 5, some number. Same with this. They won't be next to each other. It'll just be one or the other. Basically what you want to do is you want to line this 5 up so it's in the 9 o'clock position. That way this thing is in phase. So you're basically phasing the pump. Here's a picture showing that. There's the number, and you can see you line it up here so it's in the 9 o'clock position on the injection pump. Alright guys, before I go to install the new pump, I wanted to show you a few things on the old pump here. So one of which is the shaft that I was explaining to you. So you can see this 3-digit code here. This is 754. The number is irrelevant, as I said, but this 5, you want it to be in line with the casting mark here on the pump. That way it's in its 9 o'clock position. So if you're looking at it the way the service manual shows it, that 5 there is in line with this casting mark here. The other thing you want to make sure of, make sure you have your seal on your new pump, or if you're reusing your old pump, make sure you put a new seal there and add a little lubrication to this before you go to install it. And then finally, once that's on, you can put on your front gear cover, and that guy gets torqued down to 71 inch-pounds. All right, looking back in the truck here. So I have my pump just in place. I have my nuts on there, just finger tight just to catch it. And here I have my nut with my spacer washer behind, or lock washer behind it, on, and I just ran the nut down. It's not tight. I want to make sure here that my timing is still correct before I go and tighten this down. The other thing is, like I said in the description over there before, I want to make sure that I draw the pump in slowly with this gear and not with the nuts that mount the pump to the gear case housing here. You can crack that, you could damage the gear, you could damage the pump. So you always want to do it in that order. So first things first, I want to check and make sure that my top dead center mark is still lined up. And then if you go and look at the pump here, you can see my 5 there is still in the 9 o'clock position. So this pump is in phase currently. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back to the pump. I'm going to run these nuts down the rest of the way, and then I'm going to torque these down to 18 foot-pounds. Then I'm going to torque the main gear nut there down to 77 foot-pounds. Finally, last but not least, I'll give it another check, make sure nothing has moved and my injection pump is still in phase. And then I'll put the cover on there, and that guy gets torqued down to 71 inch-pounds. Not foot-pounds, inch-pounds. Again, it's a good time to replace the seal that's on that little cover. and put a little lubrication on it so it doesn't tear the seal or get hung up when you tighten it down. So you'll see the way the procedure goes. Once you have that pump in place, the nut sort of run down, you're going to tighten those 3 nuts down to 18 foot-pounds or 24 Newton meters. Then you're going to come back and that nut in the front is going to get torqued down to 77 foot-pounds. So, like I said, you want to make sure that you do this in this order. Otherwise, you can damage the gear housing, you damage the pump, and all of which you definitely do not want to do. The other thing I should point out is that spacer washer that you took off when you removed the nut, make sure it goes back on before the nut does. Okay guys, one quick thing I should point out there. When you're torquing down the nut for the injection pump, 77 foot-pounds, you have to counter hold the crankshaft, because the 77 foot-pounds is going to let the gear spin the other gears, which is going to turn the crankshaft. So just got to make sure that you're counter holding the crankshaft when you tighten that down. You can get to, there's a 15 millimeter nuts that hold this on. Just use a secondary ratchet, 15 millimeter on one of those nuts, and it's enough to hold it so you can get this thing torqued down. Well, last but not least is my front cover here with the new seal. And this guy is just threaded on. So I'm going to run this down. And then this guy gets torqued down to 71 inch-pounds. Remember, that's inch, not foot. All right, so my pump is now in, tight. It's phased with the crankshaft. So all I have left now is to connect my fuel output line, my feed lines, my electrical connections on that. Want to remind you, if you did have to loosen up any of the lines on the fuel rail, tighten those down. I can then get my air intake elbow back installed with all those electrical connections, my EGR tube, and then finally the front end accessory drive here. So I'm going to start putting all that stuff back together now. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. As you can see, replacing the injection pump on this 6.7 is actually really easy, considering. It's on the outside of the motor. Unlike Chevys, you don't have to dig into the valley of the engine to get to it. So that makes things much easier. The only other thing I could suggest to you after you replace it, with a good scan tool, check, make sure you have no fault codes. You didn't forget to connect anything important. But that's basically it. You might have a little bit of a rough running at first, just to get all the air out of the system. But from there, you know, with my scan tool, I check to make sure that my fuel pressure is what's commanded and it's staying where it's commanded. So I know that the problem on this now is fixed. But again, that's it for today's video. As always, guys, please don't forget to like, subscribe, share my videos. If you found this video helpful, there is a little tab down below. You can always send a little donation my way. They're all very appreciated. These videos do take me a lot of effort to film. You know, it takes extra time. I'd say almost twice as long as if I was going to do it just myself. I want to thank you guys for always watching and liking my videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.